Bonus round for our 6 lies. More about Columbus. He's back. If Columbus discovered it, why aren't we called Columbia, the United States of Colombia? Why aren't we Colombians? It's, well, always fun. Promiscuous Amazonian women and vicious cannibals change our mind to name it America instead of Colombia. Here's why. So here we've got an early map, and this is a kind of an early European map, kind of a Ptolemaic map, where Africa's not quite discovered, and we've got bits of India, bits of Asia. Europe's pretty clear, but it's very unclear as far as the rest of the world. And then there's a whole lot of unknown, and we have some fantastical creatures on the edge, and we can talk more about them. They usually show up when it comes to just things that, hey, we don't know what's beyond there, and you should be afraid. And so we'll throw in some little monsters on the side to encourage that fear. And just kind of a fair warning that there's danger out there. We don't know what it is, so let's make up some creepy monsters. This is the map that likely Columbus was working with. Toscanelli's map, 1474. And so it's not that Columbus thought the world was flat. Nobody thought the world was flat. We knew that the world was round since ancient Greece. And the whole idea that Columbus thought the world was flat was largely a children's story by Washington Irving. And it was meant to make Columbus seem heroic and intelligent and somebody that was standing up for what he believed in. And so this story really got really strong and became part of our mythology, part of our heritage. And it was just a story, a children's story that sold a lot of books. Washington Irving, the same guy that wrote about the Headless Horseman and Ichabod Crane, he wrote The Legend of Christopher Columbus, and it became this children's story. But in reality, it's not that the world was flat. He thought that the world was much smaller, that the ocean from Europe all the way over to Asia, and what he believed right here, Cipangu or Japan, thought it was just a much shorter distance. And so he figured it'd be just easier to go across than go all the way around Africa. Nobody had gone all the way around Africa. Portugal was working on it. They just had to find the right ship. The difficulty there is, well, it's the wind patterns. The wind patterns around Africa go south, but they can't go back up north. And so if you sail down Africa, you have to walk back until we figure out new technology like triangular sails that allow us to sail into the wind and against the wind. But that takes a little while until the Portuguese really get that going. And so the Portuguese continue to go around the African route, but the Spanish then are going to go across because they think the world is smaller, it's a shorter distance, as opposed to just going around Africa, which they're still working on. Another example where they just weren't sure how big the world was. It's one step forward, but we just don't know really what's in this area. And so they don't really know as far as the Americas at all. The idea is you can just cross the ocean and go directly into Asia. Also Australia, not even known about by Europeans at least. Africa is still kind of misshapen as they're figuring out what it looks like. So Columbus finds a good wind pattern, which takes him directly, and he goes through 4 voyages. Largely, his first little island is San Salvador, tiny little island. We've actually lost it. We don't know, because there are hundreds of islands in the Caribbean. We've lost it. We don't know what island is actually San Salvador. Nobody actually lives there or lived there at the time, so it's our best guess. But it's really a guess. We don't know which is the first island. Columbus also never actually touches land on what is known as America, unless you're counting places like Guantanamo Bay or Puerto Rico, which would be America. But as far as the 50 states, no, we never actually touched it. And so here is 4 major voyages. Cuba and Hispaniola is where he's going to spend the majority of his time as the major islands, which he thought were India. And so in his early letters, he's going to write about people as Indians. But by the 3rd or 4th voyage, he starts to figure out this is something new. This does not look like India. I haven't found the Indus River. And so it's just it takes some time for him to figure out this is different. This is new. There are multiple different voyages. Columbus has got his first voyage here, but the other Europeans are going around too, and so he's not alone. And so we've got other fun voyagers, like the Portuguese, which really start to settle into Brazil and take over quite a bit of Africa, which we're going to get into when we start to look at West African slavery. The Spanish really going to dominate America by taking Central America, large parts of South America. The French start to take over bits and pieces of Canada. The English start to take over bits of Virginia and spread up from there. Magellan's the first to actually go all the way around the planet. In 1519 to 1521, he takes a crew, goes all the way around, through the Philippines to the Spice Islands. It's in the Spice Islands that he gets into a fight with some of the local islanders. His head is chopped off. And the rest of the crew jump back on the boat and go back to Spain. So Magellan doesn't actually make it all the way on his voyage. It's his crew that makes it around the world, but he gets his head chopped off. And so the Spanish get to claim the first, but Magellan doesn't, at least not with his head on. So there are multiple different voyagers. It's not just Columbus. And eventually they claim different areas. 1501. So Columbus has already done a few voyages. Vespucci comes back from his exploration of largely what is modern Brazil, the eastern coast of South America. And he starts to bring out the idea and really publicize the idea that these recent discoveries are not India. This is something new, a new continent. And so this starts to get out there. 1507, a German cartographer, Martin Waldseemüller, names the new continent after Vespucci. As Vespucci is a great publicist, he starts to write letters and books about what he's discovered and the idea that it's something new. And so this is this early map, and we're going to focus in here, but right here is the first use of America and naming the continent. So he's referencing what Vespucci was discovering, which was Brazil. And so the first use of the name America will be near Brazil. Columbus discoveries mostly these islands here, Cuba and Hispaniola. Right down here, Brazil, named America. And so this is kind of what the world looked like according to Europeans in 1507. Notice America is still pretty tiny because we've only discovered the East Coast and the Caribbean. The rest out here, we don't know what's happening over here, so we're just going to leave that blank and find out what happens later. And Europe's solid. Asia's a mess. Europeans still really weren't sure what was happening over there. And if we focus and zoom in, here's that first use of the word America off the coast of Brazil. All these things. And so Vespucci gets back, and a couple reasons why he's going to describe the Americans in such weird ways. But also to sell books, because he'll write books about his voyage. He's going to describe some of the oddities of America, and a lot of these maps will show oddities as kind of these unknown lands. And so we start to see maps of America and any unknown land to include these kind of odd little people, including the people with multiple legs. So we've got kind of these, how many legs is that? Spider people, two-headed people. We've got the rat people, the dog people, the cyclops, the, I don't know what that is, the elephant ear people, the platelet people, the people with giant foot, and the goat people. So we start to see these as ways to sell maps, as ways to sell the story that America has all these undiscovered things. And America did have undiscovered things, and until we figured them out, we're going to kind of draw these ideas of what might be there. One thing that Vespucci really spends a lot of time on is he starts to, in his first descriptions of Native Americans, describe them as absolute cannibals, and describe the women, that the women are very willing to have sex, and things like this are exciting. And so people start to really buy his books, buy the maps, to kind of understand what's out there. And it's very exciting to talk about cannibals and all that. And there were some tribes that practiced cannibalism, but it wasn't a pleasurable experience. It was largely ritualistic and very small. They wouldn't eat an entire body and something like that. In the case of Vespucci's descriptions, he's describing them as eating people left and right and just horrible cannibals, and describing everybody as walking around crazy and naked. And so part of this is to sell books and gain fame. There's also the idea that you can't enslave somebody unless they are serious rule breakers, unless they reject Christianity. And so in the case of a lot of these tribes, they'll be described as doing horrible things so that they could be enslaved. If they were cannibals, they could easily be enslaved. There's no problem with that. But if they're just tribes living normally, if they have laws and rules, it goes against a lot of the rules to enslave those peoples. But if they're acting as quote-unquote savages, then it's acceptable to enslave them. And so we start to see cannibalism and unruly behavior and natives that are sex-crazed to sell materials, to sell books, but also to allow the expansion of slavery. So fun facts about the founding of America. And then going back, so he names this map, and it's a pretty solid map. And so we get the name of America here down in Brazil, and because it's such a well-produced map, people start to copy it. And the copying continues and continues. Eventually people figure out, oh, Columbus was first, but the name catches on, and this map spreads the information that Amerigo, or America, is the name. And so as a result of copying and copying and copying, we become Americans instead of Colombians. It was just a little mistake followed by a whole bunch of copying, so be careful about your plagiarism or you might get a country named after you. Bye.